Let's talk a little bit more about FAPA. Fred, FAPA is the oldest APA and has a storied history. Does that get in the way? When in FAPA today, do people feel the weight of that history, or is it as free-spirited as any modern APA might be?
Anybody who has dealt with 2- and 3-year-olds is probably familiar with the concept of parallel play.
Mm.
I would say that a good deal of FAPA content is parallel play. People writing about what they're interested in and not particularly caring if anybody else shares an interest.
Mm.
Now, this may be changing because we've got a few new younger members in the past year or two. And I get the feeling that they're sort of building more of a sense of community in the app. But I don't know that people, well, I don't think people feel the weight so much as to some people, including some of our younger members, our newer members, the idea of belonging to something that is such an old fannish tradition has value in itself that they want to sustain.
Mm.
Perhaps some of those people, I think, may be represented in the chat, might be able to offer their own opinions on that.
Yeah, at the end, I would love to hear how they feel about it. You said earlier that that you had you were fond or you were nostalgic or some word about FAPA. I have to say I am too, and I've never been in it. Its mere existence and continuity since the beginning of fannish time is it's a monument. For anyone that's not aware, the Fan History Project is reconstructing APA mailings. And at some point, I'll share my screen and show you. But as we scan fanzines that were distributed through an APA, we mark them with their mailing numbers, and our navigation software will allow you to kind of walk through a mailing. And if you want to see if anyone commented on some article, you can go to the next mailing and look for the mailing comments on it. But kind of digitally reproducing the effect of receiving an APA mailing. And as we scan more, then we will have more complete mailings. It's a little tough because all of the fanzines we've inherited have been less than scrupulous about which envelope fanzines get tucked into. So I'm sure sometimes we have them in the wrong mailings, but mostly not. Mostly not.
Yeah.
There's also other problems with APAs. Some include a table of contents. Some include a listing of everything that's in it. Some don't. There was, its name just went out of my head. There's a famous one that was entirely private that never had a table of contents, as far as I can tell. Little APA. Which was a lot of the pro fans of the 60s, 70s, and such like, including Silverberg, Carr, Lupoff, people like that. They just slapped the thing together with a cover page on it, and people had to just find what was in it.
Mm.
But that was again, we have two different types of APAs here, at least. In that there are ones that are letter APAs, those were mentioned in passing, like the cult. There are ones that are everybody sends something into a central mailing and everything gets stapled together, like APA-L or Intercourse. FAPA, where the fanzines get sent in, they don't get stapled together, they just put in one envelope with a cover sheet that says who's there that year, or a 4-page cover fanzine. And this makes it harder to come up with a way to keep track of things. So, the idea of actually archiving and cataloging APAs sounds like it might be easy, but it certainly isn't.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit of a minefield, as some people in the chat have pointed out, in terms of copyright and privacy concerns over APAs. And there is a difference between an APA, as Tom was saying, the way the APA presents probably makes a difference to how it will also be archived, because something like FAPA, that's lots of individual fanzines, those fanzines are quite likely to be distributed more widely beyond, but TWP is, or certainly, and I think Tom said Intercourse much the same, we're very much sort of one whole publication. So TWP will be something like this, which you can see comes in a binder, and the whole thing, the thing as a whole is, I think even the way we talk about it, I talk about TWP contributions. So you kind of, everything you put in it is a contribution to that particular issue. Whereas in ANZAPA, which did used to come in a couple of envelopes with individual zines in it, it's very much APA zines that people are producing. So something like TWP is very likely not to be, I don't think you would ever at the moment be able to scan a whole issue in without there being massive problems, because individuals would not wish that for what they wrote in TWP to be made public outside of the APA.
And then you get jokers who deliberately make it hard to assemble files and keep track of them. When I was in the cult, and this would have been in the late 60s because I was in the Army at the time, I came home from Fort Dix one weekend. I was looking for something to eat in the fridge and found a wrapped up piece of bologna which had writing on it. Apparently, decided to do a mailing for the cult on the bologna.
I've
Bruce
heard
Bell's
about
kept
that.
his in the
Yes.
freezer.
Well, I asked my folks about it, and they said, "Oh, this came in the mail, and we figured better put it in the fridge." So, okay, next time I came home from Fort Dix, first thing I did was I went to the fridge, was looking around. My mother said, "What are you looking for?" I said, "My mail."
So have you internalized fandom now?
I didn't need the thing.
What I heard about that story was that it was mostly done to frustrate Bruce Bells.
Yes,
He
a
was
lot of
He kept
things
his
were done
copy
to
of that in the
frustrate Bruce
freezer.
Bells.
There's been some conversation with the participants and with the chat about scanning APAs. So Rich, I'm going to ask you if you'll jump in right now and just give us 2 minutes on how you're scanning SEFPA and what you're doing to make sure that we don't violate any people's desires.
Okay, for those of you who received newsletter number 22, which was just sent out, what, 2 or 3 days ago, there's a short paragraph that describes how it's all going down. This is a pilot project, basically, because APAs are just as important as fanzines, but the amount of scanning is a lot larger. So we decided to give it a try for SEFPA. I had a bunch of mailings from back in the late 1990s and early 2000s. And those were the ones that were first done. They're on, most of them are online now. A lot of them are. However, there has been an opt-out, an opt-in, not an opt-out, an opt-in procedure where nothing gets put online unless we have written approval from the person involved, and Edie can tell how exactly that works. But as for SEFPA, I have a bunch more mailings to scan, including a few that Guy just sent me. Let me show you one. This is the 00 from SEFPA number 10 from
Wow.
1963. And I have the guy sent me the run from 10 up through number about 35.
Wow.
So those will be on the list to be scanned. Guy was very nice, and he sent me 2 additional issues of Woof, but those are going to probably be scanned at efanzine.com, since I don't think we have any procedures for doing it yet at FANAC.org. And also Bill is no disrespect for anyone involved, but Bill's a little bit looser for the requirements for putting stuff online at efanzines.com, which I think is good. I think we should have it 2 or 3 different ways of doing things. That's briefly it. I can answer. I mean, if you would like to fill in some of the blanks, I'm sure there are some. We can talk about that very briefly. But I don't want to. I don't want to get involved in what's going on here, because the discussion's been so good.
Yeah,
Well,
okay, thank you, Rich. We're gonna take your
Yeah.
picture right now.
for,
The
Yeah,
culture's
so we
also-
torture ourselves to get the permissions if people are living and if we can find them.
for me,
It's also difficult because while the fantasy rotators are easy to track, the fractionals, which people send out in between on their own, are impossible to track because there's no listing of them. Nobody has an index of them at all. People can work towards getting a complete set, but who knows whether you do or not, whether you actually have it or not.
You know, one of the things that I think back to my early days in fans and producing a lot of these things and the like was to come up with a strong sense of gratitude that ditto fades over time.
mm.
Check your
Yes.
fingers, Mimeo ink never dries.
Right. For me, I think of my app as extraordinarily rare and precious objects, and I treasure them because they are so rare and they are so, in some ways, ephemeral. And it troubles me to think of people just throwing them away. On the other hand, I understand that there are people who do not want their brains washed in the public fountains, as somebody in an APA once said. But I don't know. I think if I do ever get around to donating my papers, I would want to put some kind of 50 year hold on the APAs because of that. On the other hand, I recall someone saying that apazines had been used in divorce proceedings. You know, they'd been literally subpoenaed. So you can't expect your words written on paper to vanish utterly. Just like you can't erase yourself from the internet these days.
Unfortunately,
it'd be
or
a
your
shame.
credit cards. Sorry, go ahead,
Yeah.
Christine.
I think it'd be a shame if all the content of APAs does vanish because of these concerns, but I think it is quite hard to overcome them, particularly in the context of TWP. I know it would be it would be a big problem for at least one of the members if we were ever to make them available within their lifetime.
Mhm.
But it's quite hard also to find, if you want to donate something to an archive, there's not that many that really want to have stuff, but they're not even allowed anyone to look at for 25 years.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh.
I'm sorry, were you finished?
Yeah, more or less, basically.
I'm from New York. I talk fast. Sorry if I'm not trying to interrupt. So we've talked about APAs you've joined and some of those experiences. Have there been APAs you wouldn't join?
Well, I don't think I'd join an APA that had, I wouldn't join Round Razzle because I'm just not interested in funny animals. It's not that I have anything against it. God knows I'm married to the editor, right? But otherwise, it just, things that interest me are the APAs that I join.
I'd say even slightly more restricted than that, things that interest me enough to want to talk about them with the other people who are there in the APA. And as we've said before, the whole thing about an APA is who's there? Who are the people? And there are subjects that I would find interesting that I'd love to talk with some people about. Others I just have no interest in talking to.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, I don't know if I'd join an APA for a specific topic. I mean, even something like TWP has a wide range of topics within it. So I don't think I'm a big enough fan of anything to join a specific APA on it. But I suppose I don't really have an APAs that haven't really wanted to join. But there was an APA around the time that APPAs were taking off in the UK that I didn't get the chance to join, which was Frank's APPA, which was started by Greg Pickerskill and was very, very vibrant and exciting APPA. And I can't remember the criteria for joining it, whether it was invitation or whether it was kind of pseudo invitation, as in I self-selected to think, oh no, they wouldn't want to accept me in that APPA. So I think that's probably more the reason why I wouldn't join an APPA than I can't think of any APPAs that were so dull looking that I wouldn't want to be in.
Do you think a new APPA could be started today, or has on the social media taken over all of those emerging impulses?
I think that the main reason anybody would want to start a new app these days would be to exploit some aspect of communication that was better done in print than any other. In other words, something that would exploit the strengths of the APPA format. Now, I can't offhand think of what such a thing might be, though, and how that would be an improvement over an online discussion group, but there it is.
You know, I miss AWA. And sometimes I think it would be kind of cool to start it again, but I'm not sure I don't think I have permission from anybody to do that. And I'd feel like I'd have to go find some old AWANs and ask if it's okay. But it was a really special thing. And one of the reasons I'm in TWP is I miss being in a women's app.
Maybe you don't need to get permission to restart AWA. Just start something called another women's APPA.
Well,
I think
Marcy
you should
just said call it AWAS.
You should restart Biwa. That sounded really cool because you said it was very international and
That's true. And I don't have to get permission on that one. It's mine.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, the real strengths of APPAs, as we commented before, is the ability to sit and think before responding.
Mm-hmm.
And I can certainly see that would make for an interesting thing. Some people like doing that. Some people don't. There are a lot more people who don't, apparently, because there are a lot more things going on online that don't require that in fact require not that.
Yes.
I'm horrified by your comment earlier that fandom has failed at societal changes long before the rest of society has caught up to even dealing with them. So I think I'm still struggling with that. Anyways, I think we're running down a little bit. Are there other APPAs that you were not part of that you wanted to talk about?
Well, I burbled a little bit about Rowbrazzle, but you know, Ed's not here, so I can't really pull him in. Let's see, I talked about AWA, I talked about Crappa Pie. You talked about
Before Crappa Pie, there was Appa Pie, of course.
Yes, and what happened was Crappa and Appa Pie merged.
Yes.
Because Appa Pie was kind of shrinking, so they just kind of put them all back together.
There was a FanHistory APPA. It didn't last very long.
Oh,
That was in the 90s, I think.
You could almost imagine someone restarting that today. As a
Could be. It could be. Well, there's certainly some interest in there. All right. So do you guys have more topics that you want to bring up here? So I thought we were sort of maybe running a little slower.
Well, we're running a little slower, but that doesn't mean we're done yet. We might.
Okay, keep going.
As I say, I think that it's very similar to the desire to have intentional community. You know, I've lived in co-housing, and that's kind of like a life APPA. where you actually have people decide that they're going to get together and live in the same place. APAs are, we're going to put our writing all in the same place and connect with each other that way.
Mm.
I think one of the reasons that many of us when we were younger belonged to a lot of APAs was that we were sort of tasting all the stuff on the buffet to see what it was that we were really interested in, what we wanted to do. And as we learned more about who we were, we tended to concentrate our efforts more in a smaller number of activities, smaller number of APAs, smaller number of genzines, whatever it was. So as you may have noticed, fandom is getting older. A lot of the younger people that might have gotten into fandom back in our day have found other forms for communication, and they do that stuff. I'm sure that there's going to continue to be some people with an idiosyncratic or antiquarian turn of mind who find our traditional form of communication attractive, and I think that will be enough to sustain it for quite a while. But I don't think that we're going to be in a situation where we're going to have enough members of the FAPA waiting list to have something, a shadow FAPA in existence, or anything else like that.
Perhaps we should have a shadow and zapper where we split it in half so that everybody who's in it has enough opportunity to actually keep up with the APA they're in. I'm just throwing that out there, Mark. Sorry. Sandra suggests we talk more about OMPA, but I don't really know much about OMPA. But I also don't understand why APAs really dwindled in the UK while they were obviously so vibrant in the 70s in the US, North America.
I was a member of AMPA briefly. I don't remember too much about it though. I wonder if to answer your question might have something to do with the fact that Britain being a smaller country than the US, there was perhaps more opportunity for people from different parts of the country to meet in person and do a lot of their communicating that way. Anything to that idea?
Yeah, I guess that's a possibility.
Is anyone on the panel a member of SAPS? We didn't talk about them either. So
that's what I managed never to be a member of.
Yeah.
There were a lot of APAs out there. APA 45, APA 50.
APA 45 I was a member of.
Yeah.
One of the original members. SAPS used to be nicknamed the Society of Interlocking Mailboxes, as I recall, because mailing comments were such a significant part of what they did. But this I only know it's secondhand because I was never involved with it. APA 45 was a matter of essentially bringing together active people from a certain generation of fandom, and it was very enjoyable for several years at least. I imagine a lot of us sort of drifted away from it. I don't think it still exists.
Yeah,
Going back to
it started to keep Bruce Pells out, as I recall.
I wasn't aware that was a stated purpose of, at least I didn't know about that.
Bruce had worked to be an omni-APAN, and he was born before 1945. So
so you had to be
born after 1945.
In or after.
In order to get into APA 45.
Well, AWA managed to keep Bruce out.
Well, Bruce gave up on it after a while.
Going back to OMPA, just another idea which sparked by Sandra reminding me that OMPA kind of might have faded through the effort to run an EasterCon in 1973, but I think it's also a generational thing that OMPA was very much associated with fans from the 60s and early 70s, and there was a definite sort of backlash against that kind of fandom in the fandom that I came into in the the early 80s in my case, but certainly in the late 70s. Sandra might say I'm talking bollocks, but that's my theory, is that they were they were perceived as being part of that old way of doing fandom that people weren't interested in anymore in Britain.
Huh. Well, I know that when I was running BUA, I worked really hard to bring new people who'd never been in APAs before. That was part of the international thing too, because and it was hard work, because you'd get 2 or 3 or 5 people who would contribute once or twice and then vanish. And so you just had to sort of keep this thrashing up of new members, throwing people in and seeing who stuck. And I find that really important as when I'm working on an APA, that you always try to bring a new person or two in every issue or so, if possible, just
At least
to
once a
freshen
year.
things up. Yeah, I'm pleased with the influx of what, 2, 3 new members since EasterCon and TWP.
I think it's only one, but there was a couple of other people who were at least interested, and
I showed up at the
maybe,
chat.
yeah, maybe next year we'll get some more.
Yeah.
You know, another thing, there are a hell of a lot more conventions now than there were when I got into fandom. And I guess I hinted at this in a comment I made earlier, but maybe that has reduced the demand for APA style communication.
Well, that I more likely think it's online stuff, because convention chatting is a very different experience for me than APAs are, you know. And as Edie just wrote, lots of conventions are ending, so we may wind up going back to APAs and fanzines as our primary means of communication once again. Who knows?
So I'll add a convention anecdote to stir the pot a little bit. I was on a panel in Boston a couple of years ago, talking about fandom in some stripe, and we were talking about regional fandoms and the differences between Southern fans and the Northeast and all of that. And one young woman raised her hand at the end and said that she was absolutely shocked. It had never occurred to her that there could be regional differences, because the fandom she came into, the fandom she knew, was all online, and everyone was from the same place. They were from online. And so, you know, a lot of the changes, I think, are because, you know, the fannish itch is being scratched in other ways. And I don't know what that's going to mean for APAs at all, or fanzines. Well, you know,
Or conventions.
or conventions.
Yeah, we don't know. That's one of the wonderful things about fandom. We don't know. Things are going to get different. We know that. But how they're going to evolve and how they're going to change, I still find it fascinating to see. We have all these different things that are very, very different from how things were in the 60s when I started. They're different from how things were in the 70s or the 80s or the 50s. But,
right,
you know, we get to evolve, we get to change. It is what we make it. You know, what it is up to us. So the fact that we have the history and can go back and look at it, and that people here are actively involved in making sure that the history doesn't get lost, is a wonderful supplement to the fact that it's not going to be the same. You know, that we get to have our memories, but we also get to eat our cake that's new.
right.
Well, that sounds like a final statement to me. So does anyone else have, some final statement, and then let's open it up for questions. People that are listening in, please get your questions in the chat, or if you want to say something about the APAs you've been in, put your name down. So Amy, any kind of final statements?
I just am pleased because I think I see APAs kind of quietly resurging, or maybe it's just that I've been on this panel and everybody's talking about their APAs. But yeah, they've been an important part of my life since my 20s. And at some point, I plan to try to see if I can dig out all my old APAs and Xerox my zines to pass along to my daughter, so she knows what my life was like in my 20s and 30s and 40s,
Funny thing you say that, Amy, because I've been thinking myself about the various semi-autobiographical pieces that I've written in La Furnos and putting them together in a book for my daughter and for my new grandchildren.
Yeah.
Okay, Christina, anything you wanted to add?
I don't think I've got final thoughts, just maybe following on from what other people have said, that I do think APA writing it for me is slightly different from something I would do online. I know I've talked about the reflective element, just a bit of time to actually put a bit more thought into what you're writing. And I certainly would like to pull together the things I've written over the years for APAs, because I do think they are more like a way of understanding your life at different points in your life than perhaps what I write in a fanzine. A bit like a more public diary, I think I would see some of my stuff as.
So let me share my screen and show a couple of things before we turn it over to the folks that are in the room. So one I wanted to show is an image that Christina shared of an APA cover. So let me get that up.
Apologies to Alison, it probably wasn't in the best condition.
Yeah, that's the TWP cover. I think Alison Scott did it. And what it is the black is a paper cutout overlay. I think she did it on a Cricut. And below, the part you can't see is the TWP and the number, but and it's overlaid over this beautiful colored marble abstract image. And I think it's one of the prettiest APA covers I've ever seen. Good job, Alison.
And one more thing that I would like.
Don't know if.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I did put this in my fan artist portfolio for the Hugo. So I am quite pleased with it. Part of it's missing, that part of the right hand side paper cut is missing there. I don't know if it got damaged in the post.
No, I think it probably got damaged while I was reading it, so that's why I apologise when it came up, because I knew you'd recognise where it wasn't.
Yeah, it is different than my
I'll just drop a copy into the chat. So the back part is partly AI generated, or rather it is AI generated, but it oh no, you won't let me drop pictures into the chat, so I can't, sorry.
So, just to show that not all APAs have featureless covers.
Well,
I probably can put the link, it's online, so
please do.
Ed actually published a collection of Raubrazel covers, and it was sold through a distributor.
Wow.
Yeah. So and being there's a lot of cartoonists in Brazel, and so they get great covers. Oh boy, do they have stunning covers. I gotta say, TWP has some really, really nice covers. The
Swan, a 4-color ditto cover on one of my cult scenes.
Here's the
Thomson did.
That's the one Caroline did. Caroline Mullen. hopefully still here.
Yeah. And
But it is one of the features of TWP that it has had a tradition of having covers, and there are a lot of people in TWP who are, you know, quite serious artists and
some lovely
produce
art
really
covers.
lovely covers.
Now, Allison mentioned something about AI on the cover, which got me
Mhm.
wondering, are we at some point going to see an app made up entirely of artificial intelligences?
Another
why
of
would we
Alison's
see that?
covers.
How do we know we haven't gotten one? None of us be members.
Yes.
And when I said
Exactly.
partially AI generated, obviously there's a lot of, in fact, there's a ton of work done prompting the AI art generator
Yes.
to get what you want. And in fact, I didn't get what I wanted, so I had to redo lots of things. But I got something useful.
So one more, I'm sorry, Allison, please go ahead.
I'm just showing, running
Oh.
a sort of slide, very
cover
slow slideshow here.
Yeah. You should have sent me the images, Amy.
I know I
Yeah.
should, but you know,
That's the one I did,
that is a
Based-
lovely image.
based on a photo that I
I
found.
love that one.
It's got some Cornish on it.
I see that.
Very cool. All right, I want to show one more thing, and it's not a cover, but I mentioned that we're reassembling some FAPA mailings. So do you see this is FAPA mailing 100. Can you see that?
Mhm.
And this is the set of 25 fanzines that we have scanned that were in APA 100. So if you want to see what Karen Anderson had to say, you know, we've got it, and you can go through the mailing comments, and then you can run back and look at the previous mailing and find out, you know, what it is that she was commenting about. That
Edie,
kind of thing. Yeah.
one of the zines shown here is A Sense of FAPA, 376 pages, Richard Eney. And what this is a, if I remember it correctly, because I've got a copy kicking around here someplace, is a compilation of some of the most important contributions to the FAPA over those first 100 mailings. I believe, for example, that's where I read Sweet Idiocy. Yes, it is. And so on. So anybody interested in the history of APAs may very well want to have a good look through this.
Yeah.
It's 300 pages of wonderful.
376.
And there's
Of
Rochler
150.
Illos. What a shock.
150 pages is Sweet Idiocy. Which,
Yeah,
Yeah.
well,
yes.
that'll curl your hair.
I've read it.
I'm not familiar with
Who has
Sweet.
actually read Sweet Idiocy?
Busted.
Has or has not?
Has.
Has not. I have not.
I
I
have.
have.
No, I keep meaning, I think I've read parts of it, but not the
What?
whole lot.
What is Sweet Idiocy for those idiots who aren't in?
Francis Towner Laney's history of his time in fandom, with a little bit of excoriation of the whole idea of fandom at the end of it.
Ah.
And Laney
So-
was one of the most active fans of the 40s,
Mhm.
but he got upset about homosexuality. Again, here's another place where fandom got upset about stuff early and did it badly and basically got over it before
Right.
great many other people did.
I published in my one and only ever fanzine, Corruption of the Innocent, an account by Art Whitmore of finding out, going to visit after he gaffiated for a long time, going to visit some old fan friends and finding out that Francis Towner Laney had died, and he got so drunk he forgot to pick his kids up at Disneyland. It's a really awful story, and I love it.
Well-
I read Sweet Idiocy, and I was impressed by the amount of sexuality in LA fandom at the time, and in fact in LA at the time. This is the post-war 40s.
Hmm.
Well, we didn't
Well,
invent it.
he talked more about it than people were, but there was a lot of sexuality because there were an awful lot of kids being born. That doesn't happen without that.
Yeah.
In those days, yes.
Janice?
Oh, we
and-
really need to mention the last FAPA chart if we're going to talk about
Yeah.
sexuality, guys.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
yeah.
Langdon chart.
That's
At one point, there was a 3D version of a Langdon chart of sexual interactions between those FAPA members, which
has it been
consisted
updated?
of styrofoam balls and pipe cleaners. The pipe cleaners were blue for girls and pink for boys. And the OE would tell you which styrofoam ball was yours, but not who the other people were.
Are 3 dimensions enough for that?
Pipe cleaners and styrofoam balls, yes. And how the OE like knew, we're not sure whether people kind of self-reported or how that worked.
Could it be updated now? And put in and use algorithms to do a 3-dimensional version online?
Oh, and this was the swinging 70s, Jim.
Right.
Well, you know, you're the physicist.
not
You
my
figure
department.
it out.
Not my department. It's too low energy.
So,
There was an article on the ways in which this could be considered as active state physical chemistry, activation states in
Yeah.
physical chemistry, which was in the Journal of Irreproducible Results in the late 60s.
Wow.
We're just saying in the chat that Lillian Edwards also did a Venn diagram of fandom, and not Abby Frost, and it was in one of our fanzines, and that had a little arrows as to which way people were relating to each other.
so I think Lenny had something he wanted to add. Lenny, go ahead, unmute, please.
As an incentive to go to this year's Corfu, Arnie Katz has donated the complete 100th FAPA mailing, including the sense of FAPA post mailing that I believe is going to be auctioned off at the coming Corfu in Las Vegas.
Ooh.
Okay, thank you. Sandra, did you want to jump on and say a few words?
I can do. Do you want to, do you mean about the Langdon chart of 80s British fandom, the APA mailings in the Corfu auction, or anything else in general?
Or
I can give you I can give you a list of what's being auctioned at Corfu in February. It's bound copies of FAPA 99 and 100. SAP's mailings 68 to 73 and 76. SFPA 14 to 16. APA 45 number 3. NAPA 24 and 25. And something called TAPS number 1 from 1965. And that's all from, going to be auctioned off by Andy Hooper and myself in Vegas in February. Sorry, probably in last weekend in February, first weekend in March. Yeah, I've pretty much said everything about OMPA that I really know about it.
So you mentioned Tigrina, who did the first ever lesbian magazine. Was that the latter, or was there something else?
That was the latter, and if you want to read all about that, go and read Rob Hanson's newest book, Beyond Fandom, which is available on taff.org.uk. I've already recommended this as the plug of the episode in the current episode of Octothorpe. I recommend it here as well. It is incredibly fascinating and important reading.
Could you type that into the chat?
Yeah, sure thing.
Thanks. Yeah, wow, because I have collections of stuff that was excerpted from the latter biographies of famous lesbians, and there was, I can't remember what the other one was, but yes, it sounded like an utterly fascinating magazine, and it was a lifeline for lesbians in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And someone told me that thank you.
I was just going to say,
I should go read it.
Yeah, I was just going to say that as well as Tigrina, there was also in Lassus at the time Jimmy Kepner, who was outwardly gay and who was later on, who was present at the Stonewall riots, along with another fan, Dave Van Ronk.
Yes. Also a musician. Kepner was also very well known as a librarian of gay materials in the Los Angeles area. Major historian for that particular.
Yeah. We're getting away from APPAs a bit, but I believe that Kepner was a member of FAPA for a while in the full 40s.
Mhm.
He's also one of the people discussed in Osweed Idiocy, Not by Name.
Well, yeah, the funny thing is that despite him being probably the most out gay man in Los Angeles, Laney actually seems to have got on with him.
Yeah.
Possibly because he wasn't a hypocrite about it. I don't know.
Mhm.
Okay, does anyone else want to jump in? Caroline, did you want to say something?
Oh.
Oh, no is okay. Yes is okay too.
I just wanted to say thank you for this. I think APPAs are wonderful, but I'm not as good at them as I hope to be.
Oh,
You're fine.
I'm in an APPA with you, and I beg to disagree with you.
Definitely.
I'd like.
You're speaking to the woman who put her head. Oops! You're speaking to the woman who put her head in her hands when Christina's reminder arrived today, because I've been
Sorry about that.
Because I'm trying to write a letter to planning application to the planning department, because next door wants to build a 4-story extension to overshadow us, which is preoccupying.
We can write about that in TWP.
Yeah, maybe next time. I'm a bit sick of it, to be honest, at the minute. Anyway, no, I don't know how people fit APPAs into life. It's always been a solace to have a fannish conversation to go to, but it's also always been something, how the hell do I fit this into everything else that needs to be done? And I'm in awe of all the people who do it.
And you do it. I don't know why you need to feel in awe. That's imposter syndrome, Carolyn. You're busted.
You've been in TWP since the beginning, so you have not failed yet.
Yes, but I was in TWP with Maureen Speller and you, Christina, and
many other exciting people,
and many other exciting people who just left me feeling that I was not on the same. Anyway, yeah, basically left me feeling I was very ordinary and they were very not. So,
we don't.
Yeah,
so.
The thing.
And it's very easy to believe that other people felt the same about you. You were very not ordinary, and they were.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, thank you for the CD. Cheers.
Yes. Well, one of the things we do at TWP, and I think she just left, is that we do Zoom chats on there you are, Carolyn. And Carolyn runs those, and I'm in awe of her for that.
I've actually just written to Christina this evening to say I'm not doing it next year because I've just done an Easter comm and I've been doing Zoom chats for 4 years since the first lockdown. And it's not that I don't like doing them, it's just I'm fed up organising them.
Hopefully Alison will do them.
That would be wonderful.
Jim, you wanted to...
I wanted to add that Bob Silverberg, who joined FAPA in somewhere around 1948, has been trying to collect a complete collection of everything in FAPA, and he's 99.99% through with it. It has a few things he's missing in the first few mailings, and if you've got anything that was done in FAPA, say in its first 4 or 5 years, you might want to contact Bob because he's willing to purchase things to try to get an absolutely complete set of FAPAs.
Wow.
Yeah, and he'll be 89 next month. So don't delay.
Give give Bob my very fond regards. I'm really fond of him, and I'm sorry I haven't seen him in ages now.
Yeah, he's
Write him a letter.
he's okay but slow. He's had a lot of cardiovascular problems. It's public knowledge that he died twice, which is suitable for a guy who wrote things like Down to the Dead and things like that. But was recovered by National Health. He was in London, and so they kept him going. But he's slow and increasingly crotchety. Probably we all are, but he's keeping on. Having let's say going to New Year's Eve with them later this month.
Good.
I actually got Bob a SAPS item that he hadn't had, that he'd lost in a fire, which was Who Killed Science Fiction?
Yeah.
The scarcest Hugo winner.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, I hope someone can help Bob complete his stuff. It would be really nice to have a complete set somewhere in the universe.
If nothing else, maybe you could go to like the Riverside collection and Xerox it for him. It's not the same, but you know.
Thank you. Guy?
Hi. Yeah, I don't know. Am I doing this right?
I don't know. We can hear you.
I can hear you, but you're a
Oh,
little
you can hear me? Okay, fine. I'll try not to be like that. We've talked a lot about FAPA here, and I wanted to mention that one of the things that makes an APA special is, of course, its community, as Tom has been saying. But FAPA began as a community because it began back in '61 as with a few guys gathered in a guy's garage, Al Andrews' garage, and talking about how do we get Southern fandom together, because it was spread out at the time. In 1961, Southern fandom was completely out of it in terms of fandom at large. There's been a Worldcon in the South, but it had been a long time. So they founded this APA on the advice of a guy named Bill Plott, and tried to get the group, the region, to coalesce in a way, and it worked, and it's still going. I mean, it was '61. So how many years is that? Well over 60 now. I've been a member for 3 years now, and I'm proud to say never missed a mailing. We're bi-monthly, and it's like this community thing that has kept us coalesced. We have our conventions in the South. We all get together at these conventions, or we used to before we got old and sick like me. And it's become almost a dual kind of relationship for us in Southern fandom. We have our conventions and we have our APA. There have been other Southern APAs, but they haven't lasted. Myriad didn't last. There was one called Galaxy. And of course, we've all been members of the great comics APA, Kappa Alpha, and so forth. But it's the regional aspect of it that really attracts me, because we all know one another. We visited one another, and we've really become very close in that regard. We've had fights. I had a fight with one guy for 7 years in the APA. It lasted, a feud. It was amazing. Yeah, Fred.
No, I was just signaling I want to do, but add something when you're finished.
Sure, I'll be finished in just a second. But it's very special to all of us. And by the way, people were talking about doing a log of APAs, some sort of listing. I've been trying to do the zine dump about regular science fiction zines for many years now, and I was just so happy to see what Christina did with her reviews of fanzines in her last zine. Because it's so much more sophisticated and so much more deep, so much deeper than mine, and I really did appreciate that. My illness is going to prevent me from doing many more of those, but I'm going to keep it up as long as I can. And I'm going to stay in FAPA until they haul my rear end away for seed. So we're going to see about that. Okay, thanks an awful lot. I want to thank Edie for a marvelous Zoom meeting. This has just been
Absolutely.
absolutely great work, and it's good to see you here. Joe gives his regards here, by the way.
Guy
Thank you.
mentioned something that none of us touched on during our talk that you should brought up, and that is in-person gatherings of FAPA members at conventions. FAPA, for example, it used to be that there would be a FAPA party at a Worldcon, and various FAPA members would get together for a bit. And then when there were a sufficient number of cult members present somewhere, they would hold what was called a cult seance.
Of course.
So I imagine, I don't know if FAPA had gatherings like that or any of the other APAs, but that was another dimension.
TWP did at the last Easter Con.
Yeah, we have a tradition.
Easter Con to meet you guys.
Yeah. We normally try and have, well, in the past we've had tea parties, which often involve drinking wine, but that's what they're called. So yeah, there's been quite a lot of getting together at conventions, and with ANZAPA, it's more that whoever's in ANZAPA that happens to be at a convention together will try and get together at some point to maybe have a photo to commemorate.
It's wonderful. That's a wonderful
or
thing.
go out to dinner. We do that. We did that a lot with CRAPA, and also AWA would usually.
I think I did that on my TAFF trip. Maybe brunch.
And somebody mentions the chart, of course, but nevertheless, we will keep away from such terrible topics in this pristine environment. But the FAPA was like that, of course, and we had great parties there. They're still going. I was starting their third mailing back in the Dark Ages and Jurassic period, and FAPA, of course, we're still rolling. We've become kind of an amalgam app. We have printed copies still, but we've also gone more and more into just doing PDFs, exchanging those. And that is a very good way of doing an APA if you can keep it coalesced. We do have a complete set of the printed APAs, which are sent to a library and at the University of Georgia, I believe. And so we're keeping Ned Brooks's complete set going. And several of us are contributing our mailings to libraries, as I said in comments. That sometimes was at first kind of controversial.
Whoops, that's my fault. I hit mute when I didn't mean to. Sorry, Guy. My apologies, but let's let Sandra get a word in. Sandra, would you unmute, please?
All I just wanted to ask, mainly to Christina, because as Alison mentioned this briefly in the chat, and I believe that you were there at the time. There was a phenomenon in the early 80s in Britain that was basically an APA for soft toys.
Oh yes, yes.
Can you give us a little bit about that, perchance?
Yeah, I was going to bring that up, but just didn't have the time. Well, as I said earlier, after TWP, there was kind of a craze to do APAs, and everybody seemed to be inventing an APA. And there was a group of us that decided that we'd like that our soft toys needed an APA. So we got together and wrote in the persona of our soft toys. And somewhere on FANAC, there is a copy of the Soft Toys APAs anthology where we put together a kind of best of Get Stuffed, as it was called.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it was a bit of fun, as you can imagine.
Right.
I may have inadvertently dropped Guy. I'll have to get him back and apologize. Okay, so Carrie wanted to get a word in.
Hi, you guys have been asking about current APAs and about the health of current APAs. Well, I belong to the turbocharged party animal APA that originally was from Madison, but one of the functions that we're talking about how they're great for regionality, but they're also great for pulling people together who move away from that region. Andy and I have been in the APA since it started in the mid-'80s, and it has been one of the great unifiers of our life in fandom. Be one of the, and also talking about parties, we're actually having TurboCon 1 next spring in Madison, which is going to be kind of a practice for TurboCon 2, which will be a convention before the Worldcon in Seattle in 2025. So we are still very active. We are looking for new members. So if you have any interest in Midwest fandom and want to join us, or if you were in the Turbo Apple before, let Andy and want to go to our little TurboCon. That's the only criteria for the membership, is to actually have been in the Turbo at some point, even for one issue. Let us know and we'll make sure you get the details. That's it. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Carrie. So if anyone wants to recruit for their APA, put it in the chat. All right. Is there anybody else that would like to? I'm sorry, who is that, please?
Yeah. Hi, I wanted to just mention that Little APA actually did have a meeting, a lunch in Washington, D.C. 3 years ago this month, between Christmas and New Year's, and where we got most of the members together. It was a lot of fun, except everyone forgot to invite Ted White.
Oh. Was that intentional?
Well, it would take a lot of intent, but it seemed to have happened.
Thank you very much. Thanks to our participants. Great job, guys.
Thank you. Thank you for putting
Thank
this
you for
on.
organizing.
Had a great time.
It was fun.
Bye.
Bye.